Hello, people of the world, and welcome back on the Marry in Motion podcast. Today I'm joined by my colleague Alice, who grew up in Phnom Penh in Cambodia and studied at the French high school before moving to Paris for university. Do you want to present yourself?
Hello, everyone. So Marie and me work in the same company, and I arrived in Belgium around a month ago. So we're still new friends, I would say. And she invited me on the podcast to talk a bit about myself and my life.
So you grew up in Cambodia,
Yeah.
right? In the capital city.
Yes, Phnom Penh.
Okay, and you went to the French high school there.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us why you went there?
Yeah, sure. So a little bit of context about Cambodia. It used to be a French protectorate, which is a fancy word to say a colony, basically, until around the 1950s or the 1960s. But then during the 1970s, there was a civil war following a coup d'etat by a military general who was backed by the United States. And at the end of the Civil War, the Communist Party won. And there was a 3-year regime where the communists basically moved everyone out of the cities to the countryside and forced them to work in the fields. And they also killed a lot of people, including intellectuals, religious people, like monks, etc., to try and cut out any influence from the West, basically. Then there was, after those 3 years, there was an invasion from Vietnam. So there was another war. But that was also the end of that regime, as the people were allowed to go back to the cities and try to rebuild the society and the country and so on. But that means that you start from zero again. So it means that the country has no economy, people have nothing to eat once again. And during that time, my father, he had his brother basically was living in France. And so after this period of time, my father moved to France to live with my uncle. And he lived in Colmar, in Alsace for around 10 years. He did his secondary school there, and he also did some university studies. So during that time, he asked the French nationality, which he got, and he also did the military service, as it still existed in France at the time. Then around, I'm not sure exactly when he went back to Cambodia, but in the 90s, maybe 1995 or 1996, he went back to Cambodia on holidays after 10 years without seeing his family, without seeing his mother. He went there on holiday, but he found a job, so he never came back to France. And then he met my mom, and they got married, and they had kids. So when they got kids, obviously I got the French nationality already when I was born. And as the country was still rebuilding, the economy was not really working so well. They thought it would give me more opportunities to go to a French school, as it would be easier for me to go and live in France later. So that's how I ended up in the French school, and I ended up in France after.
Okay, thank you.
It's a long story.
Yeah, but I love that you shared that, because maybe some people that are listening don't really know about Cambodia.
Yeah.
So you did also a little introduction of the country.
Just to have some context.
Yeah. So, okay, your family had already ties to France.
Yeah.
And they were imagining you living there in the future.
Mm-hmm.
That you did.
Mm.
What kind of relationship did you have with the local culture versus the French one? Because your father was in France for a long time.
Mm.
How was it in your house?
Well, basically at home, we spoke Khmer, so it's the local language in Cambodia. And I was raised like a Cambodian girl, But when I went to school, we spoke French. And obviously in the French high school, you follow the same program as in France, so everything is it's basically like going to school in France, but you're in Cambodia. Like all your teachers are French. Most of the people who went there with me, they either had a French parent, so a lot of mixed kids, or they were French and they were expats because their parents came to work in Cambodia, or they were Cambodian and their parents also put them in the French school for some reason.
Okay, so you were like in a little French bubble,
Yeah.
where you were with a lot of French people also.
Yeah,
Or like,
but at the same time, it's complicated because I went to this school since I was 5. So I was there in the kindergarten until the French baccalaureate, so in terminale. And I was growing up with the same people, the same friends that I've known since I was a kid. Even the teachers, some of them, they were there for more than 10 years. Even now, they are still there. So I would say, I hate to say this, but it felt like a family, you know? Because sometimes you go to a company when you're working and they say, oh, we're a big family, but it's to kind of hide the toxic environment. But in this case, it really felt like a family and like a small bubble. But obviously, sometimes it's a bit difficult to explain this feeling to someone who didn't live this experience. But you kind of have a contrast. Well, in my case, there was sort of a contrast of when I'm at home and when I'm at school. Because when you grow in between two different cultures like this, sometimes you grow up in a way that is different from how your family would like you to grow up. Because my family will, let's say they are still pretty conservative and so on. Like in Cambodia, a girl should be super proper, respectful. I'm not saying I'm not respectful, but but yeah, it's like really the gentle girl who doesn't speak up so much, who always follows what her parents tell her to do and so on. So at that time, when as a teenager going through like how would you say that, crise d'adolescence? Yeah, I don't know how to say that in English, but
yeah, when you want to be a rebel.
Yeah, when you want to be a rebel. And I remember at one point I was like, my parents, they don't understand me. Like, you know, when you're a kid and you go through your emo phase, sort of. Yeah, so there was that kind of issue where I couldn't really talk to my parents about all of this stuff. And let's just say that I think that they also had this mindset of kind of, you have to work really hard at school, have good grades and so on, so you have a better future. Like for me, it was a lot of pressure because since I was a kid, it was always like, you really have to do good in school. You don't have time for other activities and so on. So it was a bit hard as a kid because when you go to a French school, obviously, like you have a lot of friends who they get to do sports after class and so on. But for my parents, they were like, oh yeah, but you don't have time to do your homework if you're doing too many activities and so on. But yeah, this is just my case. I'm not saying that every Cambodian parents are like this, you know.
Yeah, but maybe you had a different time than other Cambodian kids that didn't go to the French high school.
Yeah, for sure. It's very different also because honestly, I was pretty privileged to have the chance to go to a French high school, you know, because it's already like a step for your future. It gives you a lot of advantages because going to the French school also allowed me to learn a lot of languages since I was a kid. Like I started learning English in the first grade, so basically when I was 6. And then when I was in middle school, I started learning Mandarin also. Well, I don't remember any of those classes anymore, but yeah, I was also learning Mandarin and so on. Whereas in the local schools in Cambodia, the level of education at the time was still pretty low, and the programs, obviously, there was a lot of lackings and so on. Now it's getting a bit better, but I saw a statistic not too long ago about the level of education in Southeast Asia, and Cambodia was still pretty low. So.
Yeah, okay. And what were the requirements to enter the French high school? Did you go there because you had the nationality?
There's no requirement, but it's a private school, so you pay basically.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So not everyone can
afford. No, it's expensive. But the French high school in Cambodia is very closely linked to the French embassy. So a bit of history about the school. It was established before the war. And during the war, it was closed, and it was opened again by the embassy, basically, because more French people were coming back to Cambodia with their kids, and they wanted their kids to have like be able to go to school. So the French embassy was managing that, and still until now, it's very closely linked to the embassy. And at the time where I was a student, the embassy offered scholarships for families, so I think that we applied for that. And I remember my dad said that in our in our application, basically tried to say, oh yeah, he did the military service and so on, to try to get like cookie points, I would say. So yeah, I had the scholarship. My little brother also had the scholarship to help us pay for tuition, obviously, because it was expensive.
Yeah, you had a good life then, like
I had a good life, honestly. I had a good life.
And then it was easier because you went to the French high school to go to France to do your university?
In terms of knowledge, yes. But in terms of culture shock, that's a different story.
Okay. What do you mean?
Well, obviously, as I went to school with French people, like I already had some knowledge of French culture. But in the French school at the time, we didn't really have the same... We didn't listen to the same music as people do in France. We didn't watch the same shows. It was very more Americanized, I would say. We listened more to American music. We watched American TV shows. And the funny thing is that we didn't speak just French between my friends and I. Like, we were speaking French, English, and Khmer, like, mixed in the same sentence. And for outside people, it would be weird, but for us, it was normal, you know, because sometimes you forget words and you just mix it up. But we understood each other, so that was normal for me. And when I arrived in France, I was like, wait, hold on, these people, they don't understand that. So when I do that, they looked at me like, okay, you're kind of weird. And so that's one part of the culture shock. And the fact that we grew up differently, it's also hard to make friends, you know, when you arrive in France. And it's also the fact that you went to school with the same people since you were a kid. So you were never really adapted to making new friends.
So how did you manage?
So I remember that my first year, I didn't make any friends.
Oh no.
Well, I mean, I had some classmates and they were friendly, but we didn't go out or we were not that close or anything. But in my second year, I changed universities and I met some cool people, so that was better. And I think that it's after 1 year I was more adapted to living in France. So.
And was it the first time you were going in Europe or in France?
No, so that was not the first time I came to France. I have been to France several times during summer holidays because I have relatives living near Paris. So I think that was also one of the reasons why my parents were okay with sending me so far away from home, because we had relatives and they knew that if I had a problem, I could count on those relatives.
And what was the biggest shock you had when you truly went there to live?
The weather.
Really?
Yes, because when you go to France for the summer, it's warm. Of course, it's still a bit colder than in Cambodia, because in Cambodia it's like 30 degrees every day the whole year, and it's very humid, whereas when I was in summer in France, it could still be, I don't know, 22, 23 in the morning, and that was cold for us. Like, I remember when we came, we would be wearing a coat. Yeah, and you'd see locals like in shorts and crop tops and everything. I was like, wow, these people are not cold. So that was one of the things. And so when you arrive, so I arrived during the summer 2016. So that was a long time ago, almost 10 years ago. But you start school in September, and in September, I remember that year it was starting to be cold already, and that was really hard. Like waking up and it was like, I don't know, 13 degrees, and I thought, oh my god, I was not ready for that. And I remember wearing like a very thick coat already in September.
And what did you do afterwards when it got even colder?
I don't know. I just wore like, I don't know, I think 4 layers of clothes. And then when you take the public transportation, it's really warm inside. So Yeah, I was just suffering for a year until I got used to it.
Yeah, you acclimated.
Yeah. But a lot of changes. Also the water,
What do you mean?
because there's a lot of calcaire.
Like the white stuff inside the water?
Yeah, I think it's limestone. The water in Europe is very hard.
Yeah.
But in Cambodia, it's not like that. So I think that I started losing a lot of hair because of the water quality. But it's true. It happened to my brother also. Well, he was studying medicine, so I think that the stress also contributed to it. But the water quality is something to point out.
Yeah, okay, because you drank the water from the tap?
No. Asian families and friends, we buy water, like bottled
still,
water.
The quality was bad.
But it was for showering.
Yeah.
Not for drinking.
Okay.
So you have to filter the water and everything.
Did you have like a filter on your shower thing?
No, I only started to filter like a few years ago, I would say. But it's okay, I'm not bald yet, so.
But did you see an improvement?
Not really.
Okay, maybe just you lost hair because you were stressed.
Yeah, also like too many stress. But I think it's normal. It's like the start of the real adult life where you really have to learn everything. And when I was in Cambodia, I was really sheltered because my parents were like super strict, very protective. And then you arrive in France. But I was not living alone. I was living with my aunts because her daughters, my cousins, they moved out. So she had space and I was living with her. So that first year, I was not completely alone either, you know. Like she was cooking. I didn't have to take care of the groceries or anything like that. But after 1 year, she moved in with her boyfriend, so I was just living alone at her house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But no, it was cool. But then when she moved out, I had to start thinking about buying groceries and so on. So it was like more responsibilities. But by that time, I think I was already adapted to living in France.
Little by little.
Yeah, exactly.
And what about Paris? Did you like living there?
I think in the beginning I liked it because it was like, wow, Paris, you know. When you come from a small country like Cambodia and then you arrive and like everything is so big and there's so many activities. And also it's like a newfound freedom because as I mentioned, my parents were very protective and so on. So I didn't go out that much. It's not that they didn't want me to go out. It was just that I think they were so overprotective that they were scared because also I'm a girl and they're like, oh, but it's so dangerous for a girl to go out and so on. I remember one time I went to the cinema with my friend and my family also went to the mall where the cinema was.
Just to check on you?
No, but I mean, we went to pick up my friend and we all went to the mall. But I was like, okay, I'm going to the cinema with her. And then as we were walking around the mall, we turned around and we saw my dad and my brother walking like, I don't know, 5 meters away, basically.
They were really scared.
No, I think that they were supposed to do another activity. But as that activity was not open yet, like it wasn't time yet, they spent the time watching over us. And I was like, it's too much, you know?
Yeah, it's a bit too overprotective.
It was too much. And I remember my dad also waiting for me at the gate at school. I was 16 already.
Oh, okay. Because if you were 8, okay, but
no,
16...
but at 16, like, if my mom went to pick me up at school, she just... parked the car like behind the school and I would walk to the car. But my dad like was waiting at the gate, you know. Like he thought something would happen to me between the gate and the car. So that was too much for me. It was too much.
But how did they leave the fact that you were so far away and they couldn't protect you anymore?
They were probably stressed. They never told me anything about that, but I'm sure they were pretty stressed.
Do you keep contact with them? You call often or?
Now I do. But I remember that when I was, I don't know, 18, between 18 and 23 maybe, I was not so close to them. Like, I think I was calling my mom like every few weeks or something.
Mm-hmm. Maybe because you were, like when you were in Cambodia, it was too much. So now
yeah,
you have
sure.
your freedom, so you took it.
Yeah, but also... at university I was like always studying and like too much stuff going on. I had to go buy groceries, cook, eat, sleep, study, exams, you know, there was so many stuff. And it was only when I started my PhD that I had more time. Of course there's a lot of work as well, but I had more time. So no, A lot of evolution since then.
Yeah, you grew.
Yeah, obviously, and I think that I was still a kid when I was in university, and now I try to call my mom like every week, but obviously it's sometimes I call her and she's outside because there's a 6-hour difference between between Belgium now and Cambodia, so there are 6 hours ahead when it's winter time here, or 5 hours ahead when it's summertime here.
Okay, so you need to schedule, or to, like, you cannot call anytime.
No, I can't call anytime, but like sometimes I send a message and she replies when she wakes up.
Yeah, so you know. And how often do you go back?
Usually I would say an average once every 2 years, which is not a lot.
I mean, if you don't feel the need to go back, or if you don't have time, it's no problem.
I think that for them, they would like me to come back every year. But the thing is that when you're working, you don't get so many days off. I think, honestly, compared to Cambodia, we already have a lot of days off, because over there, I think they have, 5 days per year.
What?
Yeah, it's not a lot. In Southeast Asia, you don't get a lot of days off. So you have to take that into account. And also, if I go back every year, I never get the chance to travel anywhere else.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have to think about that. I think in my first years, when I just moved to France, my parents, like, obviously they miss me, so they want to see me every year. And they would prefer me to go back so that I can see my grandma and also like other family members, than for them to come and see me in France.
But did they come?
Yeah, some years they come, so I don't go, or some years I go and they don't come.
Yeah, okay.
But we see each other like once every year.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And they like it in France?
My mom likes to come and do some shopping. She also likes that it's a bit cooler, the weather, because in Cambodia, 10 years ago it was still okay, but now it's really getting very, very hot. Especially during the dry season, it can go up to 40 degrees.
Yeah, it's not.
And that's unbearable. Honestly, you can barely breathe. And if it's humid and hot, it's like hell.
Yeah.
So you just stay at home with the AC. For my dad, he likes coming to see us, but if he stays too long, like, he misses home. Because when we come here, we obviously don't have a car. Well, when they come here, they don't have a car, so they always have to wait for my uncle to drive them places. And everything is much further, it's bigger, so they're not really independent here, you know?
Yeah.
And that's something that my dad doesn't like. And my dad is kind of like a homebody, you know? He likes gardening, taking care of his plants, taking care of the dogs, doing his sports. So I think he misses his routine if he's away from home too long.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's understandable.
It's understandable.
But he also spent some time in France. Like,
yeah, but it's been a long time for sure.
Yeah.
He lost contact with all of his friends.
Sad.
Yeah, it is.
Do you think that living in France has, or in Belgium, whatever, has changed the way you see Cambodia?
I don't think it's really about living in France. It's more about me growing up.
Okay.
Like, about me growing up and taking a step back from that time when I was a teenager and I had a lot of resentment, where I was craving freedom so much that at that time, honestly, like, being Cambodian was just, okay, I'm Cambodian, and that's all, you know? Like, we're not like, super patriotic or anything. I didn't care so much about traditions or religion. Well, I still don't care about religion, but like, I didn't really care so much about all of that stuff. But being far from my country and growing older, also, I realized that it's something that it's part of me. It's my identity. If one day I have kids, obviously I want them to speak my language, because they will be Cambodian also, at least part Cambodian. And it's important because we're a small country. There's not a lot of Cambodians in the world. And we have a lot of traditions, a lot of history. And it's important to keep that part of yourself and not lose it as you move out of the country.
So how do you apply it every day? Do you have traditions that you keep?
Every day, I don't think I do something every day to keep that, but the fact that when I call my mom, we speak in Khmer, so that I don't forget the language, because that is something that is bad. I noticed that when I moved to France, and if I didn't speak the language over a long period of time, which happens obviously, especially if I was living alone, and I didn't see my relatives, I was losing vocabulary, and sometimes I would like, how do you say that already? And it's so frustrating, you know, to lose your words like that. So when I'm with my mom, like if I forget a word, I would say in French, and I would ask her, oh, what does this mean? And then she would translate and tell me.
Because she also speaks French?
Yeah, well, not anymore. She forgot a lot of her French. But my mom studied medicine, and in Cambodia, when you study medicine, the classes are in French.
What?
Yeah, I don't know why. I guess it's like a relic from the French colonial.
Yeah, but then
period.
It makes it so much harder, and you need to know French before you start the classes.
I know that the people who go to medical school, they also take French classes.
Okay.
To help them.
But it's not easy.
No, it's not easy.
Yeah, okay. Do you celebrate, for example, some days that are holy over there, or some...
Well, we have the Cambodian New Year in April. When I was in Paris, we had a Buddhist pagoda in Bois de Vincennes, Parc de Vincennes, however you want to call it. And basically the whole month of April, every Sunday, you have the whole Cambodian community who goes there, and they go to pray, or they sell food, like Cambodian street food that I don't eat so often now because it's complicated to make, and I don't know how to make them either. And no, it's nice, and then it's like you're eating stuff that you used to eat as a kid, but just you pay more than what you used to pay when you were in Cambodia, but it's still nice. So when I was doing my PhD in Paris, I went there I went there every year for 3 years. It was nice.
Is it easy to find the Cambodian community for you?
In Paris, yes, because there were a lot of Cambodians. Basically, all the people who immigrated to France after the war, or also before the war. Here, I don't know. I tried to look for, Cambodian restaurants, but I think there are like only 2 in Brussels.
Yeah, okay.
But then you have Asian supermarkets, and you can find almost every ingredient that you need.
But also for the people, the community, if you want to speak the language or celebrate the same things, do you miss that, or you don't really care?
In my case, as I said, my family is not really into... We didn't do so many cultural stuff, or even sports. Like, we didn't follow the football team or anything. Well, at the same time, our football team is not that great. So for me, it was not such a big deal. Still now, it's not such a big deal. But for example, for the Olympics, I was following a little bit like the Cambodian team. We only had 3 athletes, but still, we were in the Olympics, so that was cool.
Yeah. What do you miss the most about living in Cambodia?
I think the food. Yeah, because it's not easy to cook. You don't find exactly the ingredients, the vegetables, the fish. The meat here is better, I would say. The quality of like beef here is better. But yeah, the rest, it's really hard to find here. And also, it's very long to cook them. It takes like 2 hours or something.
But why? Do you think, like, your parents, when you were in Cambodia, were spending that much time cooking? Or
my parents, no, we had someone living with us to do like the housekeeping and stuff. Yeah, she was my nanny. So she came to live with us when I was born, and she was with us for a very long time. So she was doing all the housework and so on.
And the cooking too.
Yeah, I miss her cooking.
Luxury.
Yeah, definitely. She cooks better than my mom. And my mom admitted it, so.
Do you still have contact with her?
She passed away
Oh no,
recently,
sorry.
so unfortunately, no.
But did you keep contact afterwards?
Yeah, like when I call my mom, as she was still living with us, like
Yeah,
we would
okay.
talk on the phone and so on. But I saw her in November because I went back to Cambodia in November, and she was still living with us. But in December, she went back to her house in the countryside with her kids, and then she got sick. And it's hard to have access to healthcare when you're really in the countryside. So yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Because it must be such a different relationship if you live together for
Yeah,
so
it was
long.
like my second mom, basically.
Yeah.
But she's much older than my mom. She's almost the same age as my grandmother. And the funny thing is that before the war, she used to live with my grandmother's family. So they were together since they were teenagers.
Amazing.
So I think it was even harder for my grandmother, actually,
yeah,
to lose her.
Do you think you will ever go back?
To live there?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's nothing in chemistry there. If one day I change careers, who knows? Who knows what
maybe
the
for
future...
your retirement.
Maybe. I don't know. Well, actually, there are good things about living in Cambodia, and there are also bad things.
What are they?
Just like as anywhere, I would say.
Yeah.
The thing in Cambodia is very... So here in Europe, we can do a lot of things by foot. There, not so much. Everyone has a car or a motorbike. And I like being able to walk everywhere, you know, living in a city where you can do everything by foot. And over there, it's not so possible.
Do you think if you lived more in the countryside, there you could?
It's very hard to live in the countryside because you really have access to nothing. For now, I hope that, I don't know, maybe in 10 years, 20 years, it will be better. But there's still a lot of work to do, obviously. A lot of social issues also. But that's not the subject of the podcast, so I will not go into politics, but a lot to discuss.
Is there something about Cambodia that you wish more people would know about?
Maybe the cuisine.
Yeah, because it's not so known. We always
No.
see Thai food or
Yeah,
Vietnamese, but not so much Cambodian.
no. But the thing is that we obviously have our traditional dishes, but we had a lot of influence from Thailand and Vietnam and so on, because for hundreds of years, Cambodia was kind of under Thailand due to a lot of wars between both countries. Yeah, Cambodians don't really like Thais, and Thais don't really like Cambodians. And it's the same, like a lot of Cambodians don't like Vietnamese, and a lot of Vietnamese don't like Cambodians.
A lot of
That's another
tensions.
issue.
Yeah.
It's a lot of history between the countries, but we like insulting each other, but we're not gonna go to war or anything because we're still like economic partners. So, and there was also a lot of influence from the Vietnamese cuisine in our cuisine. So you obviously find a lot of similarities between the two, but we always add like a little twist that makes it different.
So what's your favorite dish that is traditional?
I would say the curry, the Cambodian curry. Usually we do chicken curry, so in it you can find chicken, obviously, potatoes, and then you add just vegetables that you like, whatever you like. And it's really nice. We eat a lot of fresh green vegetables that you don't find here. We also add flowers, like banana flowers. No, not banana flowers. I forgot the name of the flower, but it's like edible flowers.
In the food, in the
food.
curry.
And in the curry, we eat the curry with vermicelli, like rice vermicelli. It's very good. I hope you can taste it one day.
Yeah, I will go maybe.
I hope so for you.
Yeah, maybe you will come with me to show
Maybe.
me all of the good things. Do you have anything to add?
I don't know. I enjoyed this talk with you.
Thank you.
So I hope that the listeners will be more curious about Cambodia and they would want to visit. Right now, tourism is kind of booming, so there's a lot of more tourists coming to Cambodia, but obviously it's still pretty calm compared to Thailand and Vietnam. And it's a smaller country also, so maybe people kind of skip over, but there's still interesting stuff to do, you know.
Okay, so I hope the listeners will go to Cambodia.
I hope so too.
If you go, you can tell me. and you will be interviewed. Well, thank you for listening to us today, and see you in the next episode. Bye bye.